publicly saying no ties to Russia, but his necktie attire suggests otherwise, shared with President Putin there. And hardcore stuff now. The Daily Telegraph provides us with an image of the US president that you might not want to see. Trump exposed is the headline on the front of a mocked-up copy of Playboy, which is drawing on the publication's decision to bring back nude models. I'm not sure they'll be hiring Donald Trump, though. Well, joining me now is the executive editor of Conservative Home, Mark Wallace, and Sonia Sodha, the chief leader writer at The Observer and former senior policy advisor to Ed Miliband. Well, let's start with Diane Abbott. I mean, she makes the point. I have to say, she's the politician I've known longest. We used to work together in the TVM newsroom, and she makes the point that the struggle continues. She was first elected, Britain's first black woman MP in 1987, and yet personal comments about her abound. Do you think she's got a point?
I absolutely do think she's got a point. And in some ways, she's saying, in some ways, it's kind of even got worse, the abuse she faces. So, the pushback she used to be saying, arguments against the, arguments she was pushing around equality. And now it's sort of very personal takedowns and some very racist and sexist abuse. So things haven't got better, I think, in some ways, is what she's trying to say here. And I think good on her for coming out fighting. I think, the way that the story around her unfolded over the last week around, did David Davis sort of go in to kiss her and she push him away? And then, this text that emerged over the weekend that David Davis apparently sent a contact saying, well, I wouldn't hug Diane Abbott. I mean, it's really disgusting that we're seeing that sort of kind of commentary around women in politics in this day and age. And she makes a very important point that, the sort of the level of kind of the nastiness that women politicians face on Twitter and in other sort of realms really puts other women going off into politics. And I think she's right. I
mean, she does make the point that she thinks it's got nastier because of the growth of the online culture. She said pushback used to be against the arguments for equality and social justice. Now it is the politics of personal destruction. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's more about a change in the opportunity for people to communicate these unpleasant views than in their prevalence. I mean, remember when Diane Abbott first entered politics, it was only a couple of years after the National Front was being supposedly tipped to win members of Parliament. Britain was a very, very different country then. It's clear that there are sexists and racists still out there. What we have with Twitter now is an opportunity for them to directly ping straight into a phone in your pocket, which I think is the big change.
Where I was less convinced, I don't know whether you agree, is where she says that online culture has now affected the mainstream media and that journalists from some respectable newspapers are dismissive when you point out that they printed something that is false. Do you think that's true? Because we all work for news organisations, it seems to me, which aren't sexist and which are very aware of these problems. Is the mainstream media to blame?
I think lots of mainstream news organisations are very careful about these things, as you say, and so. But I sort of have some sympathy with the view that there may be sections of the media that perhaps aren't as careful as, say, an organisation like Sky News or as the Observer newspaper. So I think,
Conservative
or is indeed Conservative Home, exactly.
I just think this is bogus. What we do have with online culture, but also social media, is instant scrutiny by unlimited numbers of people of every single claim in every direction. Are there liars out there? Sorry, people who spread alternative facts? Yes. But you've got all these people constantly poring over you, checking whether you've made mistakes or not. One thing I do think is a little odd is that I fully applaud Diane Abbott for her stance against racism. Where is the mentions of, for example, Labour's flirtations with anti-Semitism, or for that matter, her own comments about white people like to divide and rule, which are not helpful in this at all. The simple fact is that some people are really bad and other people are flawed.
I mean, the mainstream media organ, which is slightly prone to get out a sledgehammer to crack a nut, is probably...
You said it, not me.
Probably the Daily Mail.
That's who I had in mind, yeah.
And a full-page attack here on the Archbishop of Canterbury. And what he actually said was that he linked... he said that there are a thousand ways to explain the Brexit vote or the election of President Trump or the strength in the polls in Holland of Geert Wilders, or in France of Madame Le Pen, and many other leaders in nationalist, populist, or even fascist tradition of politics. Now, was that saying Brexit is fascist?
No.
I think there's, but there is drawing a line here, isn't there? There's a kind of saying, oh, well, we've got these shocking things like Brexit and Trump and nationalism and populism and, oh, fascism. I do think it's unhelpful to draw these things together, particularly after we've seen what happens when mainstream figures try and say to 17.4 million voters, you're racists or you're ill-educated, etc., try and discount these things. Even the word populism, personally, if I was a newspaper editor, I would ban the word populism. What does it mean? It means a popular idea you do not like, and that's basically it.
But I don't think that's exactly what the Archbishop was saying, though. I think you can express worry about the rise of populism without saying that, people who voted for Brexit are fascists. And I think, I think this is an example of the Daily Mail getting incredibly
But did he cross the line when he did do that?
No, I don't think he did. I mean, he was talking about leaders in a populist tradition. What's wrong with that? There are leaders in a populist tradition that are doing better all across Europe. And I'm sorry, but if you take the Brexit campaign, if you look at some of the claims that were made, for example, £350 million, the NHS, for me, a populist claim is a claim that people make because they know that it's going to be attractive to people, even if they're not quite sure whether they can deliver it. And
like instant recession on a Leave vote, £4,300 worse off, 200,000.
Well, so they're all liars.
The simple fact, well, you'll be shocked to learn, Adam, sometimes people in politics don't always strictly tell the truth, which I can reveal exclusively to Sky News this morning.
Well, the difference is that we try to hold them to account. Now, what about Donald Trump's foreign policy? What do you make of it all?
This has always been the huge concern. The particular concern for me about Donald Trump is his closeness to Vladimir Putin, his undermining of the question of NATO.
Shares the same tie, according to the Times.
Well, indeed. If it was only the same tie, I'd be perhaps be a little less concerned. I think it's amazing to already see a White House team unravelling in the way that it has already, with Flynn going over his contacts. There's something that still doesn't add up here. We're being told, oh, well, he lied to the president. Well, Department of Justice had already warned the White House about it.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, Roger Boyes' column actually is more relaxed than I would be about America's relationship with Russia. And I agree with Mark that Flynn's resignation, Roger Boyes says, well, this is an example of America's
says he's
relationship.
Becoming more mainstream.
Yeah, he's becoming more mainstream. It's an example of America's relationship with Russia settling down. But actually, Trump really couldn't do anything but ask for Flynn's resignation, given that the Washington Post had reported what went on, given that it's clear that the White House were warned. The really important questions, why didn't Trump act sooner on that? So I'm still very concerned about the closeness of Trump to Putin.
Thank you both for coming in. We will have more on the meeting between Netanyahu and Trump later on today on All Out Politics. Coming up next, have the Russians never had it so good? We'll debate the Putin